the female spy who fooled everyone. The true story of Noor Inayat Khan. What if the woman everyone thought was too gentle to be a spy was actually one of the most important secret agents behind enemy lines? She wasn't a typical secret agent. She wasn't known for violence. She had written children's stories, loved music, and had been raised in a deeply spiritual family. Yet during World War II, she entered Nazi-occupied France under a false identity, carrying a secret radio that could connect the French resistance to Britain. Then almost everyone around her was captured. She was told to escape, but she refused. And what happened to her afterward shocked everyone who knew her story. Before we begin, support the channel by subscribing and liking the video, because this is the story of Noor Inayat Khan, the spy who refused to betray her friends. Noor Inayat Khan was born in Moscow in 1914 to an American mother and an Indian father who was a Sufi teacher and musician. Her family later lived in London and then France, where Noor grew up. But Noor's childhood was very different from what you might imagine when you hear the word spy. She loved music. She wrote stories for children. She was quiet and thoughtful, and she had been strongly influenced by her father's teachings of spirituality and nonviolence. She was not the kind of person anyone would look at and immediately think, "That's a secret agent." And perhaps that was exactly what made her so valuable. When Nazi Germany invaded France during World War II, Noor and her family escaped to Britain. She knew that her old life had disappeared. France was occupied, people were being persecuted, and Europe was becoming a battlefield. Noor wanted to help, so she joined the British Women's Auxiliary Air Force and trained as a wireless operator. Her ability to communicate using Morse code eventually brought her to the attention of Britain's Secret Special Operations Executive, or SOE. The SOE had a dangerous mission: go behind enemy lines, gather information, communicate with resistance fighters, help disrupt the Nazi war machine, and survive without being discovered. Noor accepted the challenge, but she had no idea just how dangerous her first mission would become. Noor was recruited into the SOE and given intensive training. She learned how to operate a wireless transmitter. She practiced sending coded messages. She learned security procedures and how to function as a secret agent. Her code name became Madeline. Eventually, she received orders for one of the most dangerous missions imaginable. She was going to France, not as a tourist, not as a soldier in uniform, but as a secret radio operator working with the French resistance. Her job was crucial. She would maintain communication between resistance networks in France and the British headquarters in London. And there was one enormous problem. A radio operator in occupied territory was extremely vulnerable. Every transmission could potentially give away a location. German intelligence teams were constantly hunting for secret radio signals. If Noor was caught, the consequences could be catastrophic. But in June 1943, she crossed the English Channel and entered occupied France under her false identity. She was now alone in enemy territory. Her real name had to disappear. From that moment on, she was Madeline. When Noor arrived in Paris, she joined the Prosper Network, a major SOE resistance organization. She began transmitting messages back to Britain. Every successful transmission meant London could communicate with resistance fighters. Weapons and supplies could be coordinated. Information could move across occupied Europe. But then, something went terribly wrong. Within a short period, German forces began capturing members of the Prosper Network. One after another, the people around Noor disappeared. Their radios were seized, their safe houses became dangerous. The network was collapsing. And suddenly Noor was facing a terrible decision. She was advised to leave France. She had an opportunity to escape. She could return to Britain. She could survive. But Noor made a decision that would change the rest of her life. She stayed. Why? Because she believed that if she left, there might be nobody left to maintain the communication link with London. She became the last remaining SOE radio operator in Paris. And now the mission had become something much bigger. She wasn't simply transmitting messages anymore. She was carrying the communication line almost by herself. Imagine living in a city where enemy agents could be anywhere. You cannot trust everyone. You cannot stay in the same place for too long. You cannot transmit carelessly, and every message you send could potentially lead the enemy directly to you. Yet Noor continued. She moved from one hiding place to another. She changed locations. She continued communicating with London. She was constantly under pressure, according to historical accounts. She became the last SOE wireless operator, still transmitting from Paris, after the Prosper network had been compromised. And this is where Noor's story becomes extraordinary. She knew the danger. She knew that German intelligence was searching for radio operators, but she continued. Her radio became her lifeline to Britain. And every time she switched it on, she was taking another enormous risk. For weeks, she managed to stay ahead of the authorities. But eventually, someone betrayed her. In October 1943, Noor was captured. The woman who had managed to evade the Germans for months was finally in their hands. She was interrogated. She was pressured. She was threatened. The Germans wanted information about the resistance. They wanted names. They wanted addresses. They wanted to know who was helping Britain. They wanted the entire network. But Noor refused to give them what they wanted. She revealed nothing that would betray her colleagues. And then came another shocking development. She attempted to escape. She managed to get out once, but she was captured again. The Germans now understood that they had someone who was not going to cooperate easily. They imprisoned her and subjected her to brutal treatment. According to the Noor Society's historical account, she was kept in isolation, shackled, beaten, and interrogated. But she refused to reveal the names of members of her network. But even after everything she had endured, she still didn't break. This is perhaps the most important part of Noor's story. She wasn't famous because she had the biggest weapon. She wasn't famous because she had defeated an army. Her strength was different. She had information, and she understood that information could mean life or death for other people. If she gave names to her captors, those people could be arrested. Families could be destroyed. Resistance networks could collapse. So she remained silent. The woman who had once written stories for children was now sitting in a Nazi prison, surrounded by people demanding secrets from her, and she still refused. Eventually, the decision was made to send her to Germany. She was transported first to Karlsruhe and later to Dachau concentration camp. Her story was approaching its darkest moment. But there was something her captors could never take away from her. Her decision not to betray the people who trusted her. Nothing die Stehen. She wasn't a typical secret agent. She wasn't known for violence, and now she was facing the end. Historical accounts state that she was beaten and then shot by an SS guard. Her final reported word was liberté, freedom, one word. And in that moment, the woman who had spent years trying to help liberate occupied Europe left behind a final message that has become central to her legacy. She was only 30 years old. Her mission had ended. Her life had ended. But her story had only begun to spread. You might think that the story ends with Noor's death. But this is where something remarkable happened. Instead of being forgotten, Noor's courage became increasingly recognized after the war. France awarded her the Croix de Guerre. In 1949, Britain awarded her the George Cross, one of the country's highest honors for civilian gallantry. Her story was preserved in historical records. Her name became associated with extraordinary courage, and eventually, memorials were created in her honor. The woman who had once seemed like an unlikely candidate for espionage became remembered as one of the remarkable women who served behind enemy lines during World War II. The National Archives identifies her as the first female wireless operator sent into occupied France to support the resistance. Think about the irony. The Nazis had captured her. They believed they had stopped her. But decades later, people around the world would still be telling her story. They could stop the woman. They couldn't stop the story. This is the question that makes her story so powerful. Why would someone with a peaceful background choose such a dangerous path? Why would a woman who had been influenced by nonviolence willingly enter one of the most dangerous environments in Europe? Because Noor believed that doing nothing was not an acceptable choice. She had seen what was happening to Europe. She had watched her homeland of France fall under occupation, and she believed that she could use her skills to help. She wasn't fearless. That's an important distinction. Courage doesn't mean that you don't feel fear. It means that you decide something else is more important. Noor knew the risks. She knew the consequences. And she went anyway. Noor Inayat, the lesson behind Noor's story. Today, it is easy to look back at historical figures and imagine that they must have been superheroes. But Noor wasn't. She was a writer, a musician, a daughter, a young woman who loved her family. She had hopes for the future. She could have chosen a completely different life. Instead, circumstances placed her in a war. And when the moment came, she made a choice. Her story teaches us that courage doesn't always look powerful. Sometimes courage looks quiet. Sometimes it looks like refusing to betray someone. Sometimes it means continuing when you are terrified. And sometimes the person everyone underestimates becomes the person who surprises everyone. Noor entered occupied France as a secret radio operator. She stayed when others were captured. She continued transmitting when the danger became overwhelming. And when she was finally captured, she refused to give away the people who depended on her. Noor's story leaves us with one simple question. If you knew helping others could cost you everything, would you still have the courage to help? Think about it. Because Noor Inayat Khan's greatest weapon was not a gun, it was her courage. And her final message still echoes through history. Freedom. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and tell us in the comments, what would you have done in Noor's place?